What is sound? I know it seems like a simple question, but I think that a general understanding about the principles of sound can really help you appreciate and understand some of the questions that you might be asking yourself with respect to music. Questions like, why do certain notes sound good when played in a chord while others do not? Why can a recording of an instrument sound like the musician is actually sitting in front of you instead of being played through a set of speakers? Why is it that the same note played on different instruments seems to sound different? So those are the questions I want to answer in this video, but to do so, we first have to go over the physics of sound. I'm sure most of you have heard the expression sound wave, and it's true, sound is a wave, but I think we should dig a little bit deeper and explore the two fundamental characteristics of a wave, the frequency and the amplitude. Frequency, measured in hertz, is the number of times that a wave oscillates or vibrates back and forth in the span of 1 second. Here you can see how the number of oscillations on the screen increases as the frequency of the wave increases. Now if I play the same clip again but have the speakers output the frequency, you will see that as the frequency increases, the pitch of the sound produced also increases. There are an infinite number of frequencies that you can produce, and therefore an infinite number of pitches. But in music, there are a set of established pitches that musicians and composers use over and over and over again. These are called notes. If you look at a piano, you will see a keyboard consisting of various black and white keys. Each of these keys connect to a hammer within the piano that strikes the specific metal wire that is tuned to produce a musical note. Listen to these three musical notes that I'm going to play for you. C, D, and B. They sound pretty good on their own, but what happens when I start to combine them? Let's first listen to a chord with all three notes. Okay, that doesn't sound good. Let's try just C and D. Again, not good. How about C and B? Still not good. Last one, D and B. I don't know about you, but the last combination of D and B sounded good. But why is that? The musical property that makes certain combinations of notes sound good together and others do not is known as consonance and dissonance respectively. And guess what controls consonance and dissonance? Frequency. I know I'm kind of beating this into you guys at this point, but bear with me. Look at the waveform of the last two notes I played, D and B. This is a combination that sounded good, and you can see why on the graph. The peaks and troughs of the wave of each of the pitches match up with one another on regular intervals, and therefore produce a consonant sound. Why we perceive the sounds that match up like this so well has to do with the biology of our ears and our brains, so I won't get too much into that, but let's look at the other note combinations. In the CD combination, the wave peaks and troughs don't match up with one another on regular intervals, and the sound produced is dissonant. The same is with the CB combination. When C, B, and D are all played, the chord sounds dissonant. It might be hard to find, but the only consonant relationship we see is between the waves of D and B. This is expected as I showed you that the DB combination is consonant, but the dissonance found between the CD and CB pairs overpowers the consonance of the DB pair. Okay, I think we've sufficiently covered frequency, so now let's move on to the second fundamental characteristic of a wave that I mentioned, amplitude. Amplitude is the height of a wave, and it corresponds directly to the energy being carried by that wave. Think if I had a basketball and I dropped it from 2 inches off the ground compared to 5 feet off the ground. The time I dropped it from 5 feet off the ground would have significantly more bounces than the one from 2 feet, because the 5-foot ball would have much more energy falling down. The same concept applies to sound. In sound, the energy level is expressed through dynamics, the relative loudness or softness of a sound. Sound waves with low amplitudes have softer dynamic levels than ones with high amplitude. Dynamically louder sounds have a higher amplitude and therefore they carry more energy. Because of this, louder sounds are more likely to cause hearing damage than ones that are dynamically softer. Okay, so that wraps up the fun physics. Now let's move on to the second question that I asked. Why is it that a recording of a musician playing can sound like that musician is actually in the room with you, when in reality the sounds are coming through a set of speakers? So let's think about this for a second. The sounds and the pitches that we hear are determined by the frequencies of the sound waves, and the dynamic levels that we hear them at are determined by the amplitude. Those are the two fundamental characteristics of a wave. Frequency is just vibrations per second, and we already know we can control this. If you have an iPhone, you will know what I'm about to show you. But look at my phone. The little vibration motor inside is synchronized with the audio, and it changes its frequency of oscillations to match up with the ringtone. We can actually hear how the frequency of the vibration motor affects the pitches being produced. So in reality, sound reproduction isn't as difficult as we think. We only have to care about the frequency and the amplitude of the original recording in order to accurately reproduce that sound later. The majority of the time, the recorded audio that we are listening to is being played back through speakers. So let's go take a closer look at a speaker. So when I say speaker, you probably think of something that looks like this. This is a tower for a home theater system that has two speakers in it. A signal is sent to it through a wire that determines the sound being produced. The sound being produced is manipulated by the oscillations of these speakers. The cone of them moves in and out to vibrate the sound. The signal sent determines how far in and out they move, or the amplitude, and the speed in which they vibrate in and out, or the frequency. When these speaker units are moving back and forth, the conical shape of these speaker units cups the air and pushes it out from the speaker. This creates vibration waves within the air, which translate into the sound that we hear. So I really want to reinforce this vibration principle. And to do that, I want to show you a speaker that you might not be too familiar with. This is an audio exciter. Essentially, it is a little vibration motor that you can attach to any solid surface. And what it does is, when you're playing music, it vibrates that entire surface to create sound. Before I attach it to something, let me just play it for you as is. Yeah, so that is pretty underwhelming by itself. Now I'm going to attach it to a panel like this, and we'll listen to it again and see what a difference that makes. It might be difficult to pick up on the quality of these speakers because of the microphone that I'm using, but I can assure you it sounds really good. It sounds even better when you get a set of these speakers and play music through all of them simultaneously.
Hurry, don't be late. I can hardly wait. I said to myself when we're old, we'll go dancing in the dark, walking through the park and reminiscing.
Okay, so we just covered sound reproduction, and that brings us to our last question. How can two instruments playing the same note seem to sound, for lack of a better word, different? By sound different, I mean the quality of the sound is different. This is known as timbre. If I play a note on a piano, the same note will sound different on a guitar, or flute, or a trumpet. Because I don't have access to all these instruments and I am nowhere near skilled enough to play all of them, I'm going to try to give you a little demonstration using the audio exciters by attaching them to a panel of wood, a piece of metal, and a cardboard box. I want you to listen for the difference in timbre between all three while I play the same progression of notes. The timbre of the sound produced by the metal has a very resonant, tinny, and brassy characteristic. You can hear the metal vibrating after the sound has stopped playing. The timbre of the wood was more clear and flat. Finally, the timbre of the box was full, mellow, and warm. Can you see how the materials actually affected the timbre? I didn't change the pitches of the recordings for any single one of these demonstrations. However, the quality of the sounds produced by each of the speakers were very different. The same principle can be found in musical instruments. If we look at string instruments, woodwind instruments, brass instruments, or percussion, we can see that they're all made with very different materials. And even when they play the same pitch or same musical note, they sound different. This is because of the physical properties of the materials that comprise those instruments. However, it is not just a physical property. It is also the mechanism of which those instruments are played, whether it's a reed, a mouthpiece, or a mallet. Okay, so that about wraps up my video. First, we covered the principles in physics of sound waves, and we use those principles to understand consonance and dissonance, why certain notes sound good together while other ones do not. We also use those principles to understand how recorded audio can be accurately reproduced. And finally, we used audio exciters to understand one of the characteristics that is related to timbre, the material of the instrument. I hope you found this video exciting. I enjoyed making it, and thank you for watching.